Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
they're setting us up for failure.
Black and brown cannabis entrepreneurs say the state's standing in the way of their businesses.
The Chicago Police Department is encrypting its radio communications, delaying information available on police scanners.
Plus, a new ruling from the state Supreme Court on Chicago withholding nearly 50 years of police misconduct files.
Hi, my name is Hadiya. This commercial is informational for you and your future children.
The mother of a teen killed in a shooting is teaming up with charter schools in hopes of ending gun violence.
As part of WTTW's Firsthand Segregation series, we look at why Black and Latino residents disproportionately face the severity of Chicago's lead pipe problem.
The landscapes and people of Puerto Rico are the focus of an art show making a rare visit to Chicago from the island.
Geoffrey joins us to talk some trash in tonight's Ask Geoffrey.
We have a purpose, and it is to help our community.
And coffee, tacos, and art are what a local couple is serving from inside a Mexican grocery store. But first, some of today's top stories. The House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol is postponing its next hearing that was set for tomorrow. The committee says the postponement is due to Hurricane Ian heading towards Florida. The announcement came after the Category 3 storm made landfall in Cuba. Tomorrow's hearing was expected to reveal some of the information the committee said they learned this summer. A new date has not yet been announced. Planned Parenthood of Illinois is sounding alarms over reproductive rights. The organization, as well as Illinois Democratic lawmakers, say the Republicans' agenda for the 118th Congress includes plans to federally criminalize abortion. Planned Parenthood Illinois President Jennifer Welch says the proposed federal ban would supersede the Illinois Reproductive Health Act, meaning they would no longer be able to offer abortion services.
Our extreme opponents have now demonstrated that this isn't about states' rights, as they claimed all along. This is about control. They've promised that they won't stop until abortion is banned across the country.
Welch says Planned Parenthood of Illinois has served more out-of-state patients in August than ever before. Flight attendants protest outside Chicago's two major airports today, demanding better working conditions and a fair contract. Southwest Airlines flight attendants picketing outside of Midway Airport are calling for a new contract that they say would ensure better pay and working conditions.
We're tired. We do not want to continue to have to wonder if we're going to have a hotel when we fly 14 hours a day. We need support when we're assaulted on the aircraft. We've been subjected to conditions in this economy and in the industry that are unprecedented, and we want Southwest to come to the table and work with us.
In a statement from Southwest Airlines, it reads in part, quote, informational picketing is common during contract negotiations, and we do not anticipate any disruption in service resulting from the demonstration by off-duty flight attendants. Southwest looks forward to continuing negotiations so that we can reward our flight attendants and continue attracting great talent. Flight attendants with United Airlines also picketed today outside O'Hare Airport. The union says staffing failures by management are contributing to high levels of delays and cancellations. In a statement, United Airlines says, quote, we've worked hard to reduce wait times for flight attendants to talk to a crew scheduler, including more hiring and adding digital options for some items. Coming up, a look at the next steps in the state's cannabis program. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois has made headway on expanding the cannabis industry and those who profit from it. But critics say not enough. They've got a laundry list of issues they say needs fixing, and they add that without action, promises of social equity will go unfulfilled. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Paris, Illinois was supposed to be the national model when government leaders promised that the legalization of marijuana would be used to right wrongs of the war on drugs that disproportionately harmed Black and Latino communities. 3 years later, those poised to benefit say they're still stymied.
To our governor, to our lawmakers, we are at a state of emergency right now. Without getting these funds and getting these rules changed and the legislation changed, all these people behind who have businesses are going to suffer. To the Black and Latino caucus, Progressive caucus, we all must come together to win this war.
This summer marked what was to have been a turning point after long delays due to lawsuits in the state's highly competitive social equity process. Illinois last month finished awarding 185 licenses for cannabis dispensaries. It was never expected that they'd open right away. Still, none have so far, and the clock is ticking. The licenses are only conditional, and the businesses that won social equity licenses have 180 days to get up and running. But many of these license owners say they're having a rough go of it. They say things changed during that long wait, and original funders and partners moved on, and they're unable to secure new partners, new investors, more capital because Illinois doesn't allow it. Concerns from Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration and others include that predatory lenders will try to sweep in and that new partners will dilute that social equity ownership. Former State Senator Ricky Hendon, whose group won a retail license for downtown Chicago, says that he has secured a deal, and it's wrong that the state won't let him finalize it.
It's wrong for anybody in rulemaking or in the governor's people's interpretation of the law to say that we can't do business with white folk. I like white people. Why can't I do business with a white person who wants to come into my business and give me a fair deal? What's wrong with that? That's the American way.
Hendon says he didn't go into the cannabis business only to sell out, but he says that banks that are offering loans at 18, 19%, that's just too high. He and other social equity licensees say companies that have long been operational are greedy, and they are trying to keep social equity licensees out of the retail business, as well as what is known as cannabis craft grow. Now, companies that are growing marijuana, many of them have large locations, some topping 200,000 square feet. But Illinois' craft grow, newer social equity licenses, they're limited to 5,000 square feet of canopy. Craft growers say that that is too small, given how expensive it is to build a cultivation facility, and they, too, say that investors are fleeing. They want the legislature to allow them to expand their growing space. Here again, they blame the big marijuana companies, known as multi-state operators, or MSOs, for stunting legislation that would have allowed that.
I'm tired of groups composed of people who do not look like us, represent us, or our interests dictate what we need. Right. Let me say this. It is impossible to support the inclusion of minority entrepreneurs while simultaneously opposing legislative efforts to attract investors and make craft growers and other cannabis enterprises economically viable.
The Cannabis Business Association of Illinois represents many of those businesses that have long been operational in Illinois. Its director, former state senator Pam Altoff, disputes the claim that the group tried to kill legislation that would have allowed those craft growers to expand. She says that actually the Department of Agriculture is supposed to be doing a study on the demand for marijuana, and that the association actually looks forward to working with our newer colleagues and making the industry successful and in being a partner, Altoff says. Now, when it comes to allowing social equity licensees to switch up partners and investors, she says that that's a decision up to regulators and to legislators. Meanwhile, social equity applicants say the state was supposed to come through with government funding to help them get on their feet. But so far, no money has been awarded from the state. A spokesperson for the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity did not respond to our specific questions about the Cannabis Social Equity Loan Program, but did send a statement saying, overcoming structural inequities through our partnerships with financial institutions has been challenging due to the complexity of navigating a new industry that remains illegal under federal law. In that statement, she said that DCEO is committed to its mission and is evaluating how it can improve the program to expedite getting access to capital going forward. With that, Paris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, still kinks to work out there. And now to Brandis and a local mom pushing to end gun violence in Chicago. Brandis.
Paris, it was a story that shook the nation. A 15-year-old girl who had performed just days earlier at President Obama's second inauguration, shot and killed in a park just blocks from her school. 9 years after her death, Hadiya Pendleton's mother, Cleopatra Pendleton, is still fighting to end gun violence. And she joins us tonight to talk about her partnership with charter schools and more. Cleopatra, thank you for joining us. So today we know that the Illinois Network of Charter Schools released a brief on the role of charter schools in combating gun violence. Hadiya was a charter student. She graduated from University of Chicago Charter Woodlawn before she went to King College Prep. As a charter mom, what do you see is the role of charters in addressing violence in the community?
I think that charter schools are always pioneering things. Like, they definitely work with families and communities and are always open to partnering with other schools and or officials with anything that's directly related to the betterment of its students and their families.
You mentioned pioneering, of course. Are charter schools sort of uniquely positioned to test out different options and opportunities because they are not district operated?
I think they're funded differently, and therefore they have maybe some flexibilities that the Chicago public schools do not have. But it was a public school chart. Inks is obviously one of those public charter schools, and so still neighborhood students and such are definitely able to benefit from the program that they have and all the different ideas that are going to be for the betterment of the students.
What are some of the I guess different opportunities or different ways that charter schools are working to make it better for students, to reduce that gun violence and address that trauma?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to all of them because I'm not speaking officially on behalf of the schools. I'm speaking on myself. But the thing that I witnessed as a parent of a charter school student was that, they definitely put them in positions where they would actually think for themselves and have opinions and be seen and be able to speak on the different opportunities that present themselves at the school and whether or not it benefited them in terms of their area of interest.
So, of course, like many CPS schools, and it should be clarified, obviously, all CPS schools are dealing with this, not just charter schools. But the district's charter schools are overwhelmingly black and brown students, overwhelmingly low income. This brief from the Illinois Network of Charter Schools says that 80 charters have reported at least one gunshot within one block of campus. 64 charters reported at least 100 gunshots within 5 blocks of campus. As a mother, what do you think when you hear that?
Devastating, right? Because, and as I shared today when I met with the other the attendees at the conference today, that's not things I had to think about when I was coming up. And I think it's so terrible that these young people today are being robbed of their youth and have to even think about the safety and the capacity of whether or not I'll see my classmate and or friend again because of the frequency of gun violence. It's Friday. Will I see you on Monday? I think it's absolutely terrible.
What are some of the resources that you think students, young people need? What are some of the resources that they have access to already?
Well, I mean, there's a number of different resources that they have access to already. However, we all have to step up with the roles that we play as it relates to young people and our responsibility within their lives. If we see them doing right, great. Let's reach out and, tell them great job. We see them doing wrong. Either we approach them directly or maybe their families and talk about that. What we cannot do is act like that the issues that are happening are not an issue for every household. It's not just unique to Black and brown communities. And if it is just plaguing our communities right now, it's not before long before it hits your community. And I think once everyone realizes that this is a problem that everybody is suffering from, more people stand up, and we'll start to see a lot more urgency for a resolution of our students dealing with things like this.
We hear a lot of talk, of course, about policing in and around schools. What do you think is the role of law enforcement in our schools?
Well, you know what? Law enforcement has its place. But what I will say is that there are many other levels of involvement that can be executed or adhered to before we get to policing, because as we know, unfortunately, sometimes the police bring about a fear for our youth. I mean, back when I was coming up, we looked up to the police. You know, nowadays so much stuff has happened, and there's a lack of empathy and sympathy. And mind you, I'm not saying that all police are wrong, because by no means would I be saying that. You know, I have so many relationships in a lot of different capacities with members of the police force. However, I think that you know, there are other people that can step up and become more involved or engaged with our youth before we reach out to the police.
What more would you like to see done in schools? You know, again, we talk about policing, but we've also heard we can't police our way out of this, out of our violence problem. What other steps need to be taken?
Yeah, it's not the police that's the problem by any means. I think as it relates to the school system, you know, we need to throw as much money as we can that way, because we have people who are invested in our youth, who definitely want to see them do better and what's best for themselves. However, our young people need to know that there are many other options available, right, other than violence. And if we help them identify those things, 9 times out of 10, we'll start to see some sort of change occur in the violence that's happening out here. Now, I'm not saying, you know, it'll be an easy thing, but if more people became involved and or engaged in the desire to resolve the violence that's happening out here, I think we would find ourselves in a much better place.
Okay. Long road ahead, a lot of work to still be done. Cleopatra Hadiya Pendleton, we thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And now to Paris and the potential impact of a change in law enforcement communication. Paris.
That's right, Brandis. Across Chicago, reporters and social media observers alike have kept a close ear on police scanners, often relaying that information to the public. Now, real-time police scanner information will be delayed by 30 minutes and will stream from a single online feed. As the Chicago Tribune reported, the Chicago Police Department is officially going to encrypt its dispatch channels to supposedly avoid disruptions from outside the police system. But some are calling into question the need for this change, and they cite potential issues of transparency. Joining us to explore this issue are Ed Yonka, Director of Communications and Public Policy for the ACLU of Illinois, and Myra Kwaja, Director of Public Strategy at the Invisible Institute, a nonprofit focused on transparency and releasing information. We also reached out to the City of Chicago and the Police Department, and we will share a statement that they sent us in just a moment. But first, Ed, remind us all why the Chicago Police Department is moving to encrypt its radio communications and what that means for people who listen to the police scanner and want to know what's happening right away.
Well, I think, Paris, first of all, in terms of why they're doing it, I think that's an open question. I think there's not been a lot of evidence presented that there's a need to do this, number one. Number two, there's been no public discussion of this. This is something that is simply happening in the city and around policing without a debate, without a consideration, without any of us having a chance as residents and citizens to be able to weigh in on it. I think in terms of the concerns is, people often like to follow what's happening with the police department in their community in real time. And frankly, there isn't a reason that the public shouldn't be able to do that. The police, after all, are public servants. They serve the public. They serve all of the residents of Chicago. And then the notion that their communications back and forth, which are often done in code and in clipped ways, suddenly need to be encrypted is something that really, hasn't been explained to the public, right, I think, in a meaningful way.
It did seem to kind of come out of the blue. There was a very interesting, well-done Tribune article kind of describing all this. Myra, what about your concerns and how this might impact transparency and those like your organization that try to collect data to keep watch over the CPD?
Absolutely. Well, Paris, thank you so much for having me also. So this is a worrisome change for me because it's indicative of how the Chicago Police Department has been moving backwards on transparency overall, which includes the city fighting back against Freedom of Information Act requests. And as somebody who has listened to the police scanner, use it in the context of talking with journalists, informing activists, knowing even like, oh, why are a bunch of police outside of my house or, you know, a block away? I think what is worrisome here is that we know that having encrypted and 30-minute delayed information of redacted audio takes away a lot of the utility out of this very basic public tool. Like Ed was saying, you know, we have a right to know what our police are doing, to know where they're at. And this gives them more opportunity to obscure or craft narratives without oversight.
Yeah,
so this is a huge step backwards.
Yeah, and as you're saying, they're going to encrypt it and make it available after 30 minutes, and everyone can find it on Broadcastify, which is the app or website that has all of these police scanner communications. Ed, as we mentioned, we got a statement from the police department, which reads in part, radio service lifelines for our first responders, and the encrypted radios will eliminate rogue radios with disruptive, often derogatory transmissions that disrupt the day-to-day traffic for emergency personnel. Having encrypted radios will provide added protection for communities and the personal information of victims, suspects, witnesses, and juveniles. It'll also enhance officer safety. So you mentioned you thought these concerns were overblown. Other cities have gone to encrypted communications. Is there some validity to these concerns?
Well, I think we'd like to see more evidence of it and a public dialogue about whether or not that evidence makes the case to move in this direction. You're right. This is a new tool. This is a new device that's being adopted by police agencies across the country. But I think we should stop and ask ourselves, is it the right one for Chicago? You know, Paris, I feel like every time I come on here, I say these words. We are in the midst of what is supposed to be a transformation of the Chicago Police Department after the United States Department of Justice issued a scathing report on the way the police department operated. One of the things that's required for that reform to take hold is for transparency and for public trust. This moves backwards. This moves back to the day when, as Myra said, the police can craft narratives on the scene that we discover later on are not what actually happened. And I think that it's just, this is the wrong time to use the wrong tool.
Myra, and as I mentioned earlier with Ed, other cities have kind of gone to this practice. Do we know how it's impacted transparency or reporters or groups trying to monitor the police department in those areas?
Yeah, well, I think we know from other cities and in Chicago that the police scanner is not the beginning and end of any story, but it's absolutely affected the ways that people are able to know where their officers are or be able to respond themselves, whether that be sending a reporter to the scene, right? And so I also don't think that we know for certain whether these concerns are large enough to change the technology, and we haven't had a public process to know that it makes sense for our city. Ed,
and you said the same thing, there hasn't been any public process. Is there some kind of compromise that might be amenable to ACLU and other groups if the CPD brought you all to the table and said, all right, let's figure out a better system?
Well, why isn't there a public hearing on this? Why isn't there a hearing in the city council with discussions about why this is happening, an explanation about, you know, why it's necessary, an explanation of how it will work? What other steps are being taken to, for example, help in terms of media coverage and the ability of media to be spot reporting in the way that has been so important to this city for so long? I think there's lots of things that could be done, but instead, this is actually being rolled out, Paris, already without any of those steps being taken. And again, I think just to underscore what Myra said, this is moving backwards on a process of transparency that needs to be moving forward.
Myra, is there a lever to pull here to get city council perhaps to weigh in here or reconsider, or is this kind of baked at this point?
Well, I wouldn't say it's baked because it hasn't been finished, and I push us from ever thinking that. I do think public outcry, pushing on the mayor, you know, we're coming up into an election, and if transparency is really an issue that we'll be talking about politically across the city, then it's fully within our right to speak up and demand that we have full access to the basic tools that we need to hold our government accountable.
All right, we'll watch how this unfolds, and our thanks to Ed Yanka and Myra Quaja. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And up next, Puerto Rico takes center stage in an art exhibit visiting Chicago from the island. So please stay with us for another look.
Much of the story of Latinos in America is that of entrepreneurship. About 5 million Latino-owned businesses currently exist in the U.S.
Predominantly Latino communities often bear the environmental burden of heavy industry. Residents of those communities say they have a hard time making their concerns heard.
A Chicago-based photographer has a personal understanding of immigration, and he has spent years documenting small businesses.
The forces of gentrification can make people being priced out of their neighborhoods feel powerless. But the founders of Lolita's Bodega say residents have more power than they think.
Earlier this month, just weeks before Hurricane Fiona hit Puerto Rico, a valuable collection of paintings arrived in Chicago from the island. They're on loan from an art museum in the town of Ponce on the southern coast. Now, Chicago's National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture is the temporary home to a small but significant exhibit. Producer Mark Vitale visited the museum in Humboldt Park.
This collection comes from the Museo de Arte de Ponce, the Museum of Ponce. It's an art museum. It's really the first museum to open up in the Caribbean and the first one to get accredited back in 1959.
Much of the museum remains closed following an earthquake in 2020.
The thing was that they have this collection, the biggest collection in the whole Caribbean. They wanted to do something with it. They wanted to stay relevant. They wanted to reach out to different places. And so they reached out to us, and I said, I would love to have an art collection, an art exhibit made up of Puerto Rican artists.
It is historical artwork dating as far back as the 1700s, including paintings created during Puerto Rico's colonial era. Most focus on the landscape and the people of the island.
It's called Nostalgia for My Island. Not only will you feel nostalgic about the island if you've ever been there, but it has you dreaming, it has you thinking of different sorts of things. This exhibit deals with 3 issues. It deals with my people, my island, my home. These pieces as a whole have never left the island. These are pieces that we, as Puerto Ricans, we've seen in books. We may have seen pictures of them, but we have never really seen them in person. And so for us to have this collection here is just a remarkable thing.
The museum in Humboldt Park upgraded its galleries to secure and protect these rare works, most of which were painted in oil. We met a volunteer who's also an artist, and he grew up in the town of Ponce.
It's really emotional. It's the first time that we have this type of exhibition like this in Chicago, in U.S. And I know that a lot of people are definitely going to be super proud to be able to see. A lot of people, they never had the opportunity to go to the museum in Ponce. That be able to see this work here, they will be overwhelmed for a lot of people, but it would be great. You see something different in every piece.
Something that did not make it out of Puerto Rico before the hurricane, most of the catalogs for the exhibition remain on the island.
What I want people to take away is that there's a history behind the Puerto Rican people. Yes, we are American citizens, but you should also take a look at who we are. Puerto Ricans are 1/3 Spaniard, 1/3 African, and 1/3 Taino Indian. This exhibit explains exactly who we are as Puerto Ricans.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The exhibition is called Nostalgia for My Island. It just opened at the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture, and it's open until June 9th of next year. Also, tomorrow at the museum is an event called Chicago Chefs Cook for Puerto Rico. It's a fundraiser for hurricane relief efforts. There's more to see on our website. And now, Paris, back to you.
All right, thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, the state Supreme Court hands down a ruling on Chicago withholding nearly 50 years of police misconduct files. We share the details. New analysis finds neighborhoods with majority Black and Latino residents face higher amount of lead levels in their water. Geoffrey Bayer on why Chicago said good riddance to some bad rubbish boxes in tonight's Ask Geoffrey. And meet a wife and husband duo taking entrepreneurship to the next level with coffee, tacos, and art. But first, some more of today's top stories. A lawsuit filed in Indiana seeks to block President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. The lawsuit claims that the plan is an abuse of executive power and would harm borrowers in some states who would be forced to pay taxes on the forgiven amount. It's one of the first significant legal challenges to Biden's plan. A report released this week by the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the plan could cost about $400 billion. Community leaders are calling on officials to do more to address abductions and violence against women in Chicago. This following the attempted kidnapping of a woman in the West Loop neighborhood over the weekend.
And the young lady that was almost abducted has to know that she has a support system around her. And we are going to be that support as a community, as a city. And we just want her to know, if you need anything, we're going to be here. We're going to advocate with you and for you.
Now, leaders are calling for the creation of a task force to address abductions and missing women, in addition to hiring violence interrupters to help deter crime in the city. Construction is kicking off for a new $14 million culinary hub in Englewood. The hub, Englewood Connect, involves the restoration of a landmark firehouse as a culinary center and community space in the heart of the community.
We must continue to tell the true story of the vibrancy of this community. And these investments are critically important to make sure that Englewood residents can reclaim their own narrative and garner more support from private, philanthropic, and of course, city investment.
It's part of the larger Invest Southwest initiative that is aimed at investing in community development projects throughout the South and West Sides. And now to Brandis for details into a new state Supreme Court ruling on police misconduct files. Brandis.
A legal odyssey that lasted nearly 7 years ended today with a ruling by the Illinois Supreme Court. It says Chicago officials did not violate the Illinois Freedom of Information Act when they refused to turn over nearly 5 decades worth of secret files detailing allegations of misconduct by officers. But the fight over police accountability rages on. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. And Heather, this lawsuit was brought by a man named Charles Green. Tell us about him.
Well, when he was 16 in 1985, he was convicted of a quadruple murder. In 2009, he was released, and ever since, he's been trying to prove his innocence. As part of that effort, he asked the Chicago Police Department to release every complaint filed against a Chicago police officer between 1967 and 2011. The police department refused to do so, triggering this court fight that, as you said, has lasted the better part of a decade.
So why did the city resist his request for more than 48 years worth of police complaint records?
Well, in another case, a judge had ruled that the city was not allowed to release those records. And the city said, look, there's an injunction. There's nothing we can do. Even though a year after Green made his request, the Illinois Supreme Court, in a separate ruling than the one we're talking about today, said these records are public and members of the public are entitled to get them. That didn't make any difference to the city, and the Supreme Court upheld that decision today.
So the city council nearly settled this case a year and a half ago before it touched off a political firestorm. Where does that fight stand now?
In limbo. The city's lawyers had recommended the city pay Charles Green $500,000 to resolve this lawsuit, but the city council basically rejected it, saying that it smacked of, quote, hush money, and that because it included no agreement to release these records, it was inappropriate. It remains in limbo today.
And in short, Heather, the Illinois Supreme Court ruling ends Green's lawsuit. Is this fight over?
It does not. Hours after the ruling, he and his lawyer sent the city a new Freedom of Information Act request. So we're right back in the beginning where we were in 2015.
Okay, I'm sure there will be more to come from that one. Heather Sharon, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now to Paris and alarming findings on lead in water for some Chicago households. Paris.
Brightest, 1 in 20 tap water samples taken from thousands of Chicagoans found lead at or above federal limits. This according to a recent analysis by The Guardian. It also found that 9 of the top 10 zip codes with the largest percentages of high test results were in neighborhoods with majority Black and Latino residents. As part of WTTW's First-Hand Segregation Initiative, we dig into this topic deeper with Gina Ramirez, Midwest Outreach Manager with the Natural Resources Defense Council, Taylor Moore, a freelance reporter based in Chicago who wrote the story about Chicago tap water for The Guardian, and Dr. Susan Buchanan, Clinical Associate Professor of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We reached out to Chicago's Department of Water Management and their commissioner was not available. However, they did provide a statement which we will get to in a moment. But first, Taylor Moore, to that one statistic, why is it that 9 of the top 10 areas with the higher rates of lead in water are in Black and Latino neighborhoods?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Paris. So we found that many of the homes with the highest lead levels were in predominantly low-income Black and brown neighborhoods. I think that a lot of the reason is because this is an occurrence with older homes, particularly homes that were built before 1986, and we see that with residents with old homes, a lot of the pipes haven't been replaced or maintained very well. Due to, there was a requirement up until 1986 that all lead pipes installed in Chicago had to have been made of lead. So this has been a problem for really a century.
Right, so especially felt most acutely in the older homes, which we know there are so many in Chicago. Dr. Susan Buchanan, let's take a look at some of these other statistics. A little less than a third of tested water samples showed lead above the bottled water limit, and that's about 5 parts per billion. And then 1,000 of the 24,000 tests showed lead levels above the federal EPA limit of 15 parts per billion. So, Dr. Buchanan, what does it mean to be above these 2 thresholds with lead?
Well, first thing I wanted to point out is that you can't assume that that percentage pertains to residences because there were duplicate samples that were not accounted for in this study, which is a big shortcoming of it. And if you work out the percentages, what the results actually said was that 4% of the homes, no, not 4% of the homes, 4% of the samples, some of which were repeated at the homes, but this was not outlined in the report that was in the Guardian article, were above the 15 parts per million EPA safe limit. So 4% is a very low number.
So you're saying that this shows you that the level is safer than what it initially appeared to be?
Absolutely.
Or the amount of homes that it's a much smaller percentage.
We don't know what the percentage is. I'm a scientist. I read journalistic articles with skepticism. I spent some time on this article. I found that 4% of the levels were above the EPA limit, which is definitely in compliance. But I do want to certainly confirm that any lead that a child is exposed to can cause health effects. Very subtle neurocognitive delays, neurodevelopmental effects, even at low levels. The science is very clear on that. So therefore, there shouldn't be any lead in the water. I just don't like it when findings are exaggerated. And the comment that there are more, more of the areas of more neighborhoods that are non-white that experience these higher levels, I have to say, as an epidemiologist, most of the neighborhoods in Chicago are non-white. So that's not surprising that most of the levels that were found that were elevated were in non-white neighborhoods. Whites are a minority in Chicago, only about 30%.
Whatever percentage the homes that lead does appear above that threshold, and it is dangerous above that threshold. As you mentioned, I want to get to a statement that the city water department gave us. They said that Chicago takes its drinking water quality very seriously and that water has been in compliance with all industry, state, and federal standards for years. The Chicago Department of Water Management offers one of the largest free testing programs in the world and voluntarily shares the results online to keep residents informed, in addition to sending individual results directly to each resident that completes a kit. Now, Gina, in addition to being with the NRDC, your mother, she qualifies for major assistance to replace her lead lines. She's had a lot of trouble getting that going. Explain why.
Yeah, so my mom qualifies for the Equity Line Replacement Program. She's disabled, she's retired, her house is over 100 years old. And during the pandemic, she was really excited because we grew up drinking bottled water and they needed the deed to her house, real estate forms. My nephew resides with her and they needed his Chicago Public School report card, which wasn't accessible during the pandemic. They also needed a valid driver's license, even though there was a moratorium on expired licenses. Because of the pandemic, we had to drive her downtown, make sure that she could get a valid license. And still, this isn't enough paperwork for the city. My sister experienced the website crashing. It's just been such a headache.
And Taylor, we've known that this lead pipe replacement problem has been an issue for years under Rahm Emanuel, under Mayor Lightfoot. They've all spoken to this, to the urgency to replace all the lead service lines, and yet only about 180 have been replaced out of hundreds of thousands. Why is this so slow to get off the ground, especially when you consider in the federal infrastructure bill there was $15 million earmarked to help Chicago get started on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it has been really egregious to see how slow the process has been. The promise of replacing 650 lead pipes made by Mayor Lightfoot was made 2 years ago at this point. I think a lot of what she chalks it up to is needing funding at the city and state levels to go about this massive undertaking of replacing 400,000 lead pipes. I think it's also a bureaucracy issue with the Department of Water Management. I think it's a lot of factors. And I do believe the funding from the bill in Congress will help. That $15 billion. I don't believe it's been dispersed yet to the city, so it remains to be seen how much Chicago will be getting.
And Dr. Buchanan, for those that are concerned about the lead content in their water, there are tips that the city puts out, like running your water for a little bit of time to flush it out. Just remind us some of the best practices here if you do want to drink your tap water and be safe.
Yes, if you have lead pipes, then overnight or whenever there's a long period of time where the water is just sitting in those pipes, there's going to be some leaching of the lead into the water. So it is this flushing for 5 minutes, which will bring the water from the water main and flush out all that leaded water that collected overnight. So that will help. Not cooking with hot water is very important because there's higher lead levels in the hot water. Not using lead or water from lead pipes to constitute baby bottles. And the city does provide free water filters for those who want to use them, and does state that pregnant women may want to choose bottled water over tap water if they live in homes with leaded pipes.
And Gina Ramirez, we only have a little bit of time left, but just tell us what you'd like to see from the city to fix this process, especially for low-income folks or folks that qualify for assistance to replace lead pipes.
Yeah, I think that the mayor is dragging her feet and that she needs to make this a more equitable process for mothers like mine who are retired and just trying to, address this public health crisis that the city isn't really owning up to. So I think that they should really cater to low-income minority residents first who live in environmental justice communities and prioritize lead service line replacement in those homes first.
All right. Well, a lot to think about, and we are trying to pin down the mayor on this very issue. I know Heather Sharon has asked her many times, so we will keep following this. But for now, our thanks to Gina Ramirez, Taylor Moore, and Dr. Susan Buchanan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And up next, an encore edition of Ask Geoffrey. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Longtime Chicago Alderman Roman Puchinski once said, "There's nothing as crucial to an alderman as garbage." So how did garbage cans become a source and symbol of political power in this city? Geoffrey Baer is here with some trashy history in tonight's Ask Geoffrey. Hey again, Geoffrey.
Hi, Brandis. Trash talk tonight.
That's me and you. So this question comes from Jean Smiling Coyote in West Ridge. The question is, when I was walking home today, I saw this concrete box in an alley in West Edgewater. Was this product the predecessor to our modern freestanding home garbage cans?
Okay, well, let's take a look at the object our viewer is trash talking about. And she's right. This is basically an old trash receptacle, which people also used as their own private incinerators, made of concrete and metal. They were manufactured from the 1920s through the 1940s. On the lid, you can see the name of the manufacturer, Sanitary Garbage Box Company. This was one of a handful of local garbage box makers. Residents would throw their trash in the top opening and they could burn it in there. And then sanitation workers would shovel out the ashes or the unburned trash through a second opening near the bottom on the alley side. Here's a look at a different box that we found in a northwest side alley. This one has been painted, so it looks silver.
That's fascinating. So if a few of them have survived all these years, they must have been pretty sturdy. Why don't we use them anymore?
Well, beginning in the 1950s, the city phased them out because they were small and difficult to empty without leaving a trail of debris, making them a favorite dining spot for rats. But it took a demolition crew with sledgehammers to dismantle the boxes. So some of them were just never torn down. Now, instead of the boxes, the city required residents to supply their own covered metal garbage cans, and many citizens balked at the expense. Trash collection was handled separately in each ward, and as you said in your introduction, the aldermen and other ward bosses often saw the service as a way to win favor and win votes from constituents. So in some wards, they began providing 55-gallon steel drums free of charge, but of course, with the name of the responsible Paul stenciled on the side. The turquoise barrel in this picture that you can see is emblazoned with the words Kelly cans for 47th Ward Committeeman Ed Kelly. My former next-door neighbor in Chicago, Greg Basil, was the superintendent of streets and sand in the 44th Ward, and he fondly remembers Bernie cans stenciled with the line, "Compliments of Alderman Bernie Hansen." Other barrels carried the name of the 43rd Ward Superintendent Pete Chivarelli, who, by the way, also owned Demon Dogs and managed the rock band Chicago, a trifecta of Chicago cred.
Isn't it, though? And that's what everybody wants, is their name on a trash can. When did the plastic carts that we use now become the standard?
Those began appearing during Harold Washington's administration in 1985. They saved money because just one sanitation worker is all you need to attach the cart to a motorized arm that dumps trash into the truck. Now, 47th Ward Alderman Gene Schulter was an early adopter of these because the carts replaced the Kelly cans of his rival, Ed Kelly.
Okay, so the trash has been picked up. Then what has Chicago done with it?
Well, the options have traditionally been you either burn it or you dump it. Now, I remember as a child, my grandmother's South Side high-rise apartment building had a trash chute right down the hall, and it emptied into the building's own incinerator. Schools, hospitals, and other large buildings typically also had their own incinerators, and there were these cleaner burning big city-owned incinerators too. But by the 1980s, the trash had more plastics and consumer electronics and toxic chemicals, which created air pollution worries, and that ended incineration. The last municipal incinerator closed in 1996.
And of course, that leaves us with the dumping option.
Yes, and many places in the city, Brandis, are literally built on trash. Decades of dumping thousands of tons of trash daily into landfills literally changed the topography of Chicago, creating mountains up to 17 stories high in some places and filling up quarries and clay pits that had been used for brick making. Of course, no one wanted landfills in their neighborhoods for obvious reasons. We found this picture of an area around 47th Street and Damon Avenue when it was a dump in 1906, to give you an idea. And eventually all the dumps were filled up anyway. Today, there are no active landfills within city limits, and Chicago's non-recyclable trash ends up about 100 miles away in one of 4 landfills, 2 of them in Illinois and 2 in Indiana. But that waste doesn't go entirely to waste. The gas created as the trash decomposes is captured and sent to gas-to-energy plants, which then sells it to utility companies.
And also a good reminder to reduce, reuse, and recycle, Geoffrey.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Always good talking trash with you. Thanks, Geoffrey.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can find more on this and other Ask Geoffrey questions on our website. And while you're there, be sure to toss in your own questions about Chicago to Geoffrey Bear. And we're back with more right after this.
Ask Geoffrey is brought to you in part by BMO Harris Bank.
Okay. Can you get this? I don't have my wallet. Oh, really? It's funny how that always happens. Yeah, it's fine.
With BMO Harris, you don't need your wallet. You can get money from any BMO ATM using your phone.
Uh-oh, looks like someone can buy their own tacos. Okay.
You could also pay them back with Zelle.
So many ways for you to pay. You know what? I'm not hungry. I'll just have some of yours.
Order for BMO.
Ooh, tacos, banking. Some things are made to be mobile.
That feeling you get when your phone is your wallet. That's the BMO effect.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been far from easy for small businesses. Many of them have had to get creative and reinvent themselves to stay afloat. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez recently visited a grocery store in Waukegan serving more than fresh produce. Here's another look.
What's up? How's it going?
Adam Carson and Nidia Gonzalez are the owners of Supermercado Gonzalez.
Hey, how are you?
It's a Mexican supermarket that Nidia's parents opened in the 90s. About 2 years ago, the married couple took over management during the pandemic.
I loved growing up with my parents and in this store, just living a very entrepreneurial life at a very young age. Like, I remember one of my biggest first purchases was piñatas.
The grocery store is only one part of their journey. When customers make their way towards the back of the store, they'll find a coffee shop that Carson runs called Drip and Culture.
The fact that this is a black and brown owned coffee shop, like in the suburbs in Lake County, it's just a really incredibly different experience, right? We cannot underscore that enough. There's not a lot of us.
It's not where you'll typically find a coffee shop,
You can do that ice store.
but the owners say it's part of their rebranding and bringing new collaborative energy to the store.
My dad always says, like, you know, hay que darle sangre nueva, which is like you got to give it new blood, you got to give it love, like a business needs attention and love and, you know, all of these things. And so us coming back and doing all of these changes really helped to, you know, add some vibrance to the store.
Along with coffee, Nidia recently opened a boutique and art studio on the second floor called Gather, where she's hosted yoga among other classes.
For me, it's a community. It's a community center, kind of. You know, it's a place for people to come in and gather around similar interests, you know, the love of cute stuff, the love of art, the love of hand making, and it's just a place for people to come in and learn those things. Look at this beautiful bracelet that we're making together. I wanted this to be a safe place that people can come to and be vulnerable. Share in this space, you know, what it means to be a Latina, what it means not quite so Mexican, not quite so American.
All right, y'all have a great one, all right?
The evolution of the store is part of a bigger mission for the Carsons, a space where other entrepreneurs also have a chance to learn and showcase their passions.
For us, it's very much about how do we take our experience in corporate and bring that into the day-to-day operations, but also bring it into how we think about running this business and how we think about teaching others in the community how to run a business as well.
Eres lo máximo, Benja.
Máximo, el máximo de todo, ¿eh? No digas nadie, no que es un secreto.
One of their latest ventures is the creation of Entrepreneurs Collective, a program aimed at supporting people who want to open a business.
And we're going to bring in subject matter experts to talk about like pricing strategies and web design and product placement and marketing and all those things that these guys need to really form the foundation for a solid business.
As the couple continues to evolve their business, their goal remains the same, to make an impact on the community.
It's a multi-level experiential place where you'll be immersed in like different cultures and have like a really great experience. I don't know the word for that.
Melting pot.
I mean, melting pot
It's
is,
a whole melting pot in one building.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Beautiful.
To learn more about the coffee shop or the art studio, head over to our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Tension in Springfield as 2 lawmakers ignore Governor Pritzker's calls for resignation. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and much more.
And how a kidney transplant recipient is helping others navigate chronic kidney disease. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.